Here's something we don't talk about enough. Loneliness isn't always loud. It doesn't always announce itself with isolation or crisis. Sometimes it's quiet. It's just the person who shows up at the exact same time every day because that routine is the only stable thing they have. It's the stranger whose face you recognize but whose name you'll never learn. It's the brief, transactional interactions that make up most of human contact in the modern world. 4 seconds at a toll booth, 10 seconds at a coffee counter, 30 seconds in an elevator. We've convinced ourselves these moments don't matter because they're not deep, not intimate, not real connection. But for some people, those moments are the only connection they get. Here's the uncomfortable truth. We're surrounded by people we see constantly but never truly notice. The toll booth operator, the night janitor, the delivery driver, the person on the same bus every morning. We process them as functions, not as humans. We hand over money, say thanks, and move on, never considering that they might be watching for us the same way we're unconsciously watching for them. That our small, repeated presence in their day and theirs in ours might be the only pattern of familiarity in an otherwise chaotic existence. And when one of those people suddenly disappears, we feel the absence. Not dramatically, not with grief we can name, but with a quiet, nagging sense that something in the rhythm of our world has changed. This channel believes something that makes people uncomfortable. The smallest interactions can carry the most weight. Not because they're profound, but because they're consistent. Because showing up, literally just being present at the same time, in the same place, with the same small gesture of recognition, can be a form of care that we do and have language for. It's not friendship, it's not love, it's something quieter. It's witnessing. It's the silent agreement that we're both here, both moving through the world, both deserving of acknowledgement. So here's the story. A toll booth operator named Sandra, who worked the overnight shift on Interstate 90, noticed a green Honda Accord that came through her lane at exactly 4:22 a.m. every morning for 18 days. She didn't know the driver's name. She barely spoke to him, but she noticed him. And when he didn't show up on day 19, that absence hit her harder than it should have for a stranger. What she learned about why he stopped coming and what his routine had meant to him will change the way you think about the people you see every day but never really see. If you're ready to understand why 4 seconds of recognition can matter more than hours of conversation, let's begin. The night shift at a toll booth is a lonely job. You see 1,000 cars, 1,000 faces, but they all blur into one long stream of headlights and exhaust fumes. For me, though, there was one driver who stood out. He wasn't flashy, didn't drive a fancy car. It was an old beat-up sedan, the kind you wouldn't look at twice in a parking lot, but he was my constant. Every single night at exactly 2:17 a.m., he'd roll up to my booth. He always paid in exact change, a handful of coins he'd have ready in his cup holder. He never said much. Just a nod, maybe a quiet thanks if the weather was particularly bad. He had kind eyes, I remember that most. Tired, but kind. His hands were calloused, the hands of someone who worked hard. In the brief moment our worlds intersected, I'd build a little story for him in my head. Maybe he was a baker heading home after kneading dough all night, or a security guard at a quiet warehouse, or a factory worker on the graveyard shift. He was a fixture in my solitary world, a silent companion in the dead of night. His car was as much a character as he was. A faded bumper sticker that once probably said something witty was now just a peeling white rectangle. The passenger seat was always piled high with old newspapers and what looked like tool catalogs. There was a little air freshener, a green pine tree, hanging from his rearview mirror. It had long lost its scent, but he never took it down. It was these little details that made him real to me more than just another transaction. I started looking forward to 2:17 a.m. It broke the monotony. The nod, the coins, the quiet departure. And that was okay. It was our thing. Some nights, he'd be listening to an old rock station, the music barely audible through his closed window. I'd try to guess the song. It became a little game I played by myself. Then, one Tuesday, 2:17 a.m. came and went. No beat-up sedan. I told myself not to worry. Maybe he took a different route. Maybe he was sick or on vacation. But as the minutes ticked by, turning into half an hour, a strange feeling of unease settled in my gut. The rest of the night felt longer, emptier. The steady stream of cars seemed anonymous again, faceless. The next night, I was practically holding my breath as the clock crept towards 2:17. Nothing. And the night after that, the same. A week passed. Then two. The space he used to occupy in my night was now a gaping hole. I started paying more attention to the other drivers, hoping to see his car, but it was gone. It was illogical, I know. He was a complete stranger. I didn't even know his name, but his absence was loud. It felt like a star had blinked out of my lonely night sky constellation. I started to worry, really worry. My mind, which once created stories about his job, now conjured up darker scenarios. Had he been in an accident? Had something happened at work? The kind, tired eyes haunted me. I found myself scanning the local news headlines on my phone during lulls, looking for any reports of accidents involving an old sedan. I felt like a detective in a mystery no one else knew existed. Can you find him for me? It sounded insane even in my own head. I was just the toll booth lady. Our connection was fleeting, transactional, but it had felt like more. Months went by. I eventually accepted that he was gone. Maybe he'd moved or changed jobs or retired. I hoped it was something simple, something happy. I tried to forget about him, to let the memory fade back into the blur of 1,000 other cars. But every now and then, especially on a quiet Tuesday night, I'd glance at the clock as it hit 2:17 and feel a small pang of something like loss. Then, last night, something incredible happened. It was almost 3 a.m., long past our usual time. A shiny, new-looking pickup truck pulled into my lane. It was so different from his old car that I barely registered the driver at first. But then he leaned over to pay, and I saw him. He looked different, rested. The deep lines of exhaustion around his eyes were gone. He was smiling, a real, genuine smile. He held out a credit card, not a handful of coins. He must have seen the recognition in my eyes because he chuckled. "Figured you might not recognize the new ride," he said. His voice was warmer than I had imagined. Or me, I was speechless, just staring. He continued, "My wife and I finally saved up enough to open our own little coffee shop, the one we always dreamed of. No more night shifts at the factory for me." He gestured back with his thumb. "She's actually in the passenger seat. She's asleep." We just closed up our first week. I looked over and saw a woman sleeping peacefully where the old newspapers used to be. I just wanted to come this way one more time. Seemed right. He gave me the same familiar nod, but this time it wasn't weary. It was full of life. And then he drove off, not into the lonely darkness, but towards a new morning, a new beginning. I watched his taillights disappear down the highway. And for the first time in a long time, the night didn't feel so lonely. Sometimes you don't need to know someone's whole story. Sometimes just knowing they got their happy ending is more than enough. Thanks for listening to my little story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe for more. See you next time. By day 15, Sandra had built a small ritual around 4:22 a.m. She'd finish whatever she was doing by 4:20, clear her workspace, and position herself ready at the window. When the green Accord appeared, she'd have his receipt ready before he even handed over the toll. It shaved maybe 2 seconds off the transaction, but those 2 seconds felt like respect. Like saying, "I see you. I know you're here every day." And she thought maybe she was imagining it, that he seemed slightly less tired on the mornings when she was ready for him. A tiny easing in his shoulders. A fractional lengthening of his nod. She also started noticing other details. The car's headlights had a slight misalignment, the left one angled lower than the right. There was a coffee cup in the center console that looked like it was always the same cup, refilled daily. On day 16, she caught a glimpse of the back-seated gym bag. A stack of papers, nothing unusual, but enough to suggest a life beyond this 4-second interaction. She wondered about him. Was he coming from somewhere or going to somewhere? Was 4:22 a.m. the start of his day or the end of it? Did he have family waiting for him? Or was he driving toward an empty apartment the way Sandra drove toward her own empty apartment every morning at 7:15? On day 17, something shifted. The man pulled up to the window at 4:22, as always, but this time when he handed over the toll, he hesitated. "You're here every night," he said. It was a statement, not a question. Sandra nodded. 7 years, she said. "You're one of the most punctual people I've ever seen." He smiled small, but real. "I don't like being late." He paused, like he was deciding whether to say more. "Thanks for, I don't know, noticing," and then he drove off. Sandra stood in the booth, holding the dollar bill and coins, and realized she'd just had the longest conversation of her entire shift. 18 seconds, but it had weight. It had meant something. The next morning, day 18, she was ready at 4:20, as always. 4:22 came, then 4:23, then 4:25. No green Accord, no gray hoodie. No exact change on her counter. Just an empty lane and a growing sense that something had gone wrong. Sandra's first assumption was practical. He'd changed his schedule. Maybe he'd taken a day off. Maybe his shift had moved. Maybe he'd found a different route that avoided the toll. She told herself she was overreacting, that worrying about a stranger's absence was irrational. But the worry didn't go away. At 4:30, she radioed the supervisor station. "Hey Mike, has there been any, I don't know, any accidents or incidents reported on the northbound side tonight?" Mike's voice crackled back. "Nothing on my end. Why?" Sandra hesitated. "Just wondering. Regular. I usually see didn't come through." Mike laughed. "You're keeping tabs on commuters now?" Sandra felt embarrassed. "Never mind. Forget it." The rest of her shift dragged. She kept glancing at the clock. 4:45, 5 o'clock, 5:15, as if the green Accord might still appear, just late for the first time. It didn't. When her replacement arrived at 7 a.m., Sandra sat in her own car in the employee lot for 10 minutes, scrolling through her phone for, what? Local news? Accident reports? She didn't even know his name. She didn't know enough to search for anything specific. Finally, she drove home, but the absence sat in her chest like a weight. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the last thing he'd said. "Thanks for noticing." Had he been saying goodbye? On her next shift, night 19, Sandra arrived early and checked with the other toll operators. "Any of you seen a dark green Accord late 90s comes through around 4:22 a.m.? One of the evening shift workers shrugged. "Doesn't ring a bell," another said. "You could check the toll records. If he uses the same transponder or plate, it'll be logged." Sandra hesitated. Accessing toll records for non-work reasons was technically against policy. But at 3 a.m., when the supervisor was on a break, She pulled up the database and searched for transactions in lane 3 around 4:22 a.m. October 2nd through October 19th. 18 entries, all matching. A license plate number. A registered address in a town 47 miles north. And then on October 20th, the day he didn't show nothing. No entry, no transaction anywhere in the system. He hadn't just changed lanes, he'd vanished. Sandra didn't sleep for 2 days. On the third night, she did something she knew was crossing a line. She Googled the license plate number. It led her to a name, Martin Schaefer, and an address in a small town she'd never visited. She searched the name along with the town and found a recent obituary. Martin Schaefer, 43, passed away unexpectedly on October 19th. He is survived by his sister, Laura, and will be remembered for his quiet dedication to his work and his commitment to routine. The obituary didn't list the cause of death, just unexpectedly. Sandra sat at her kitchen table, staring at the screen, and felt a grief that didn't make sense. She'd known this man for 18 days. She'd spoken maybe 40 words to him total. And yet the loss felt real. She thought about reaching out to the sister, but what would she say? "Hi, I'm the toll booth operator your brother saw every morning. I just wanted you to know I noticed him." It felt intrusive, inappropriate, but it also felt necessary. After 2 more days of internal debate, Sandra wrote a short email to the funeral home listed in the obituary, asking them to forward a message to the family. The message was simple. "I worked the toll booth on I-90 exit 47. Your brother came through my lane every morning at 4:22 for 18 days. He was always kind and always punctual. I wanted you to know that he was seen, that his consistency mattered to someone. I'm sorry for your loss." She didn't expect a reply, but 3 days later she got one. It was from Laura, Martin's sister. "Thank you for writing. Martin had been struggling with depression for years. He'd recently started a new treatment plan, and mornings were the hardest for him. He told me once that driving to work at the exact same time every day was the only thing that felt stable. I didn't realize someone at the toll booth noticed him. It would have meant a lot to him. He died by suicide on the night of October 19th. I think he'd been planning it, but he made sure to keep his routines right up until the end. Thank you for seeing him when he didn't think anyone was paying attention." Sandra read the email 3 times. She cried in her kitchen, alone, for a man whose full name she'd only learned after he was gone. But she also felt something else, gratitude that she'd noticed. That in the 18 days he'd passed through her lane, she'd made the small effort to see him as a person, not just a transaction. Have you ever thought about the strangers you see every day? The barista who makes your coffee? The person you always pass on your morning walk? Or the cashier at your local grocery store? We often go through these daily encounters on autopilot, barely noticing the people around us. But what if one of these fleeting connections turned out to be life-changing? This is the incredible true story of Martin Schaefer and a toll booth operator named Sandra. It reminds us just how powerful a simple human connection can be. Martin Schaefer was a creature of habit. Every single morning he drove the same route to work, and every morning he passed through the same toll booth on the Bay Bridge in California. And every morning, for years, he was greeted by the same smiling face. Her name was Sandra. She wasn't just any toll booth operator. She was a ray of sunshine. She'd offer a cheerful good morning, a bright smile, and sometimes a funny comment about the weather or the traffic. For Martin, this brief 10-second interaction became an essential part of his day. It was a small, consistent dose of warmth and positivity that set the tone for everything that followed. He never learned her last name, and she probably never learned his, but they had a connection. One day, Martin drove up to the toll booth, and Sandra wasn't there. He figured she was just on a day off or maybe sick. But then one day turned into a week, and a week turned into a month. Martin started to feel a genuine sense of loss. That little spark of joy was missing from his morning commute. He started asking the other toll booth operators about her, but no one seemed to know where she'd gone. He missed her so much that he decided he had to do something. This wasn't just about a familiar face. It was about someone who had unknowingly made his life a little bit better every single day. Driven by a feeling he couldn't quite explain, Martin decided to take action. He wrote a letter to his local newspaper, the San Francisco Chronicle, hoping someone could help him find the smiling toll booth lady. He described her infectious cheerfulness and how much her simple greetings meant to him. He titled his letter, "A Little Light on the Bridge." He poured his heart out, explaining that he just wanted to thank her for being a bright spot in his daily routine. He wasn't sure if anything would come of it, but he had to try. To his surprise, the newspaper published his letter, and the response was overwhelming. It turned out Martin wasn't the only one who had been touched by Sandra's kindness. The newspaper's office was flooded with calls and letters from hundreds of other commuters who also knew and missed her. They all shared similar stories of how Sandra and friendly words had made their stressful morning drives a little more bearable. She was a local celebrity, and none of them even knew her full name. The story snowballed, capturing the heart of the entire Bay Area. Eventually, the newspaper tracked Sandra down. Her full name was Sandra Bemis, and the reason for her absence was heartbreaking. She had been diagnosed with intestinal cancer and was undergoing intensive chemotherapy. She was fighting for her life and had to leave the job she loved. When the newspaper told her about the outpouring of love and support from all the commuters, she was completely stunned and moved to tears. She had no idea she had made such an impact on so many people's lives. She said, "I was just doing my job. I just tried to be nice." The newspaper arranged for Martin and Sandra to finally meet properly, away from the rush of the toll booth. When they saw each other, they embraced like old friends. Martin was able to tell her in person how much her daily greetings had meant to him. Sandra, in turn, was able to see the face of one of the countless people she had brightened. The story of their connection became a symbol of hope and kindness throughout the community. Donations poured in to help Sandra with her medical bills. People sent cards, flowers, and messages of support. That small 10-second interaction every morning had blossomed into a massive wave of community love. Sadly, Sandra's battle with cancer was a difficult one, and she passed away a few years later. But her legacy lived on. Martin Schaefer continued to share her story, reminding everyone of the profound impact of small acts of kindness. He spoke about how Sandra taught him, and thousands of others, that you don't need to do grand gestures to change the world. Sometimes all it takes is a smile and a warm hello to a stranger. This story is a beautiful reminder for all of us. In our busy, often disconnected world, it's easy to overlook the people we encounter every day. But every person has a story, and every interaction is an opportunity to share a little light. Maybe it's a simple thank you to the bus driver, a compliment to the server at a restaurant, or just a friendly nod to someone you pass on the street. You never know whose day you might be brightening or whose life you might be touching. Sandra proved that kindness is a superpower we all possess. Let's remember to use it. Thanks so much for watching. If this story touched you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs a little reminder of the good in the world. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories. See you next time.